So Tara Garnett, how should we best organise ourselves to feed the world, protect biodiversity, address climate change, have a better planet, and all of the above?
Well, I think the first thing to say is that we may not be able to do all of those things perfectly all at the time everywhere. And I think the second thing to say is that the things that we need to do are going to be hugely different depending on where you are in the world, who you are, what the agro-ecological context is, and so on and so forth. I do think that there are several priorities and several courses of action that we need to pursue. First of all, I think it's absolutely critical that we ensure that natural forests and grasslands are protected. Land controls are absolutely critical, and that they set the non-negotiable framework within which everything else that we do on this planet to produce food and fibres and everything else that we need, those are the constraints. The second thing is that when thinking about agricultural land use, the variables are how much food we need, what kind of food we need, and how we produce it with what impacts. And it's going to be a really tall order to produce sufficient nutritious food for everybody while not causing further environmental damage, while sticking within these environmental limits. I think an important part of the story is not mindlessly assuming that we need to be producing more food of the kind that our demand trajectories indicate that we need to be producing. So I think we need to question the growing demand for animal products, meat, but also our rising demand for commodity crops, the kind of rice, the wheat, the maize, and so forth. I think we need to look at global nutritional needs, which may not be for refined carbohydrates and animal proteins, but for a more diverse range of carbohydrate and protein sources, and for fruits and vegetables and so forth. So we need to figure out actually what is good to eat, and then see how we might reconfigure agricultural landscapes so as to provide those foods. I think there'll also be trade-offs. I'm not sure whether we can. I think producing nutritious food for our population is going to mean that the environmental impact of agricultural production is lower than it is today, but it may be higher than what we need it to be, and that's going to be the really tricky thing, how we balance human needs against ecological requirements. I think addressing food waste is going to be an important part of the story, but we can't pin all our hopes on that. There will always be some measure of food waste in an imperfect world with imperfect distribution. But I do think we need to get prices and regulations right so that the context of consumption and production is dramatically different, so that producers are producing the foods we need in the way that we want them to, and consumers are making the right choices. And I use the word choice advisedly, because we don't make conscious choices about what we buy, or at least that's only part of the story. The price, the affordability, our accessibility of food, cultural norms and values, economic constraints, legal constraints, all these are hugely important in determining what it is we eat. So, to put it really, really crudely and simplistically, we need to avoid bringing any more land into agricultural production. We need to preserve wild areas. We need to produce differently. We need to develop ways of producing food that cause less environmental damage. we need to consume differently, so that's better, and without an assumption of more is better. And we need to change the governance of production, distribution and consumption so that food is more equitably distributed and waste is reduced.
Thank you, Tara. That was admirably clear and comprehensive. On the diet issue, how best should we structure our diets? Is this a vegetarian diet? Is it a diet with reduced meat?
What are the key component parts of a good diet?
I think Michael Pollan put it pretty well when he said, eat food, not too much, mainly plants, or words to that effect. I don't think we need to get hung up on whether it's vegetarian versus small quantities of meat. If you are a vegetarian, you are very much linked to the livestock sector through the consumption of dairy products and potentially eggs. So I think the message is one of less. Arguably, small quantities of animal products in the diet can make better use of land insofar as you're making use of land unsuited to crop production, and you're helping through pasture land keep carbon stored in soils, even if you may not be necessarily sequestering it. Perhaps that's another issue we'll be coming on to in a minute, the role of grazing systems in helping draw down carbon from the atmosphere. We can return to that. Yeah. But generally, the picture should be one of unrefined grains and carbohydrates without focusing just on the kind of the wheat, the maize, the rye, the kind of the unholy trinity, as it were. More vegetables as well as fruits, of the not hot-housed, not air-freighted types, small quantities of animal products, and I think aquaculture may in time become an important part of the story, where it is possible to develop aquaculture systems that are more sustainable, because many of them aren't.
Yes, indeed, that's very true. Where do you stand, if you stand anywhere, on the vexed issue of the role of GM versus agroecological approaches to agriculture? I assume you have a characteristically nuanced view on that issue, but I'm interested to get it out there.
Well, I don't think it's a question of versus.
No.
So I think, again, when you look at the need to get greenhouse gas emissions down dramatically and reduce environmental impacts in other ways, we need to be looking at all tools at our disposal. GM may have a role to play. As an example, it may help us deal with the question of omega-3s in the diet, which are only obtained, the largest source is oily fish. We have a problem of, unsustainable fish harvesting. So there have been developments where plants have been genetically modified to supply oilseed plants to provide a greater concentration of omega-3s in their oil. So that's an example where it could possibly be of benefit, or where you're breeding crops that have additional nutritional value, or that are resistant to drought, or whatever it might be. However, just because GM may have a part to play, it doesn't mean that it is the solution, or even a very significant part of the solution. And the danger, as I see it, with the GM agenda is the danger that it might hijack all the funding and all the research attention and all the policy attention, when there are other actions that are at least as important. When it comes to the sort of There's also a traditional divide between sustainable intensification and agroecology, and if I were to put that very crudely, it's sustainable intensification is producing as much as possible on a given area of land so as to spare land for nature, whereas agroecology is seen to connote a more harmonious integration of human activity with the natural world. In practice, again, I think it's a false divide because, if we go back to the point that it's absolutely essential that we do not deforest further or plough up pastures further or whatever it might be, then at the large global scale, land sparing is absolutely essential. However, at more local scales, we have to think about what the landscape actually is, what balance of ecological functions it provides, and fit our agriculture within that. So at the local scale, there may be a lot of sharing of land with nature. So it's going to be a bit of a mixture.
Thank you, that's very clear. On the grazing issue, which you've just raised, there are some, Alan Savory, etc., who argue that livestock grazing and done in a certain way could restore the land and so on. There are others who are more critical. Could we explore that issue as you mentioned?
Sure. I think the most important point to make is that worldwide, grazing systems have historically, and indeed today, continue to be extremely damaging. They they are a driver, they have historically been a driver of deforestation and land degradation. The drivers are now changing with intensification in the livestock sectors, which means that there has been a switch away for demand for land for pasture towards land for cropping. And I suppose that's the context within which we see the role of grass-fed animals. I think they have a value in keeping carbon stored in the ground, in it not being released and ploughed up for another purpose. On the other hand, the claims that with good grazing management you can sequester so much carbon that we're going to solve all our problems is just simply wrong. The more degraded the land, the more scope there is to improve it, and so the more scope there is for sequestration. But the area of land that is degraded worldwide is perhaps not as high as Alan Savory would and his supporters would suggest. And there are huge constraints to do with climate, water availability, and other sort of ecological constraints, which mean that the potential for landscapes, grazing lands worldwide, to be these great big, draws down of carbon from the atmosphere is simply not there. If you take Europe, for example, the sequestration potential where grazing lands are already, they've reached that soil carbon equilibrium, there's not a lot of scope for a great deal more. So I think all you can say about the role of grazing animals is that they play a part, but it's nowhere nearly as important as the advocates of the Savory method would suggest.
Thank you. And there are no panaceas here.
No, alas.
Are there societies, communities, countries, landscapes where you feel we're getting things right in this arena? Any areas that spring to mind? Food waste campaigns, or the way a particular landscape is managing the competing demands of nature and agriculture?
I'm not sure I can point to a particular country which has got it right on the agricultural front. I would point to a couple of countries that are starting to have a conversation about the need to align health and environmental objectives when formulating dietary guidelines, and Sweden's a case in point here, and the Netherlands is also has recently developed dietary guidelines which make a point of highlighting the need to consume in ways that are good for the planet as well as for human health, and the potential synergies between the two. I think the other thing about some of these Nordic countries is that the openness of the debate and the willingness of of industry to engage in the debate is also really positive, which is not the case in other parts of the world.
Thank you. Very, very interesting. I wanted to ask, on the personal front, how you got involved in this subject. What drew you to understanding the food system and working on it? I'm always interested
Well,
in interviews.
if you want, I had, after I'd done my first degree, which was in English, I then did a Master's in Development Studies, and I was very fired up with the desire to save the world, so I went off to India and discovered that I wasn't not really going to be doing that. I wasn't very good at saving the world. So I came back and started doing some volunteering work for an organisation that's now Sustain. It was at the time the National Food Alliance and Safe Alliance, and I developed a couple of projects there, one of which was called Growing Food in Cities, which was all about the benefits of urban food growing, which is a very complex, at the time I was very fired up with zeal at the benefits of it. I now realise it's a slightly more complicated set of issues, but one way or another I moved to a different organisation. I got working on food miles at the time where there was starting to be early life cycle assessment studies that were showing that although food miles was kind of flavour of the decade in the 1990s, that actually it was much more complicated, and that the agricultural stage had a much greater overall impact than simply the transport leg of the food supply chain. And I got really interested in that, and I thought, well, why is no one working to try and bring people together to look at how we can understand how the food system as a whole contributes to greenhouse gas emissions and how we can reduce them. So that's why I set up the Food Climate Research Network. So it was a kind of evolution of, a long-standing interest in food issues and a kind of evolution of that understanding. So yes, I've been working on it for about 25 years.
It's amazing. And do you feel any particular thinkers or philosophers of food or agriculture or observers of this issue have sort of understood it in depth in a way that is in accordance with your own understanding? You mentioned Michael Pollan earlier. Are there others?
I think my main sources of inspiration, to put a cheesy phrase, come possibly from outside food. I think when you think about food, I think we need to think about the bigger picture about consumption and what we mean by progress, and what we mean by the good life, and so on and so forth. And so I would say that one source of inspiration has been my PhD supervisor, Professor Tim Jackson, who has done a lot of work on sort of redefining what we mean by prosperity. But I think a lot of my sources of inspiration actually come from English literature and the visions that different authors have had of what it is to be alive in a very strange and ultimately meaningless world.
Wonderful. Any particular authors in mind?
Usually the more agonised variety.
Okay, I look forward to reading this. I was a vegetarian in my university years. I then lapsed. I'm now a vegetarian again, and I'm psyching myself up for the view that actually if the whole world went vegetarian, actually we'd go a very long way towards the kind of system that we require. I think it's too simplistic. You've said so already, but is there something in that? Could we all sort of push on this front, given that the scale of the animal suffering out in the world, the scale of the resource demands that the intensive farming industry requires, etc.?
I don't think, and I speak as a vegetarian myself, I don't think there's a qualitative difference in benefit from being a vegetarian that eats reasonably generous quantities of dairy products and a meat eater who eats very low levels of meat in the diet. It's animal source foods. When it comes to the ethics of animal production, that's possibly a different issue, but possibly not, in that if you're eating dairy products or eggs, you are linked to animal slaughter, whether you like it or not. And if you take India, for example, which is a vegetarian country, they're also the world's second largest beef exporters because they've got a problem of male cattle. What do you do with them? Well, you export them and keep your eyes shut. So I think the way forward is substantially reduced animal protein consumption. For some people, vegetarianism is the response to that, and for some people, it's eating meat, at the weekend and being vegan for the rest of the time. It's going to be different.
Happy, healthy, good.
In much lower quantities. There are people who kid themselves to think that if they just eat happy animals reared on grass, it's all going to be okay. It's not.
Thank you. I think that's very clear. I'm sure you're right. The French government have an initiative called 4 per 1,000, which is about increasing soil carbon and encroaching carbon in the soil. It seems to be a very interesting proposition. You've done some work on this. What's your view on the soil carbon agenda?
The goal is, again, it's laudable, and insofar as it's a sort of a concept or a refrain around which people can sort of coalesce, I think that's great. I think it's pretty optimistic. And I think the big danger is that people think of soil carbon as a way of solving our climate problems. It's not, because soils reach equilibrium after a point, and then so you can get quite a lot of soil carbon gain in the first few years of the change in management practice, and then the benefits progressively decline to a point where soils are effectively in balance, the carbon going in versus the carbon going out, and they don't accumulate anymore. And if you put all your eggs in the carbon sequestration basket and think you can carry on, doing all the other fossil fuel intensive, carbon intensive things that we do, then we'll just have shunted the problem further along in time. So yes, it's part of the solution, but it is not the solution. And the 4 per 1,000 goal is only going to be possible in certain parts of the world, in certain soils.
Thank you very much. That's very clear. What about agroecology? Agroecological approaches to farming are, you mentioned earlier, better for biodiversity within the landscape, but then on the other hand, sustainable intensification with very significant improvements in yield could offset land elsewhere for conservation. It's a tricky bind.
Yeah, and I think it's going to depend on the area in question. If soils are, very fertile and lend themselves well to agricultural production, then farm them intensively. On landscapes that have other ecosystem services to offer, I don't really like that phrase, but you know what I mean. Then those perhaps should take priority over the need to produce lots of foods. In natural grasslands that maybe have co-evolved with wild herbivores, then there is a role for extensive livestock production rather than really intensive. So I think it's going to be very context specific.
Yes, indeed. And what happens to the food system in the changing climate? What happens in a 2-degree world? What happens in 1.5 and 3, 4, 5, 6? I mean, it's probably not worth thinking about, but how does it?
Well, I think everything just gets harder and more precarious. The regions of the world that will become less suitable for agriculture will obviously increase. I think what we'll get is more volatility and variability. Some regions that are now suitable for cropping may end up not be, and may only be suitable for livestock production, which raises its own additional questions. You'll get drought and flooding, and there will be changes in sort of cold weather snaps and crops that need cold weather in order to germinate. That's not going to be possible. So it's going to be an uncertain world, and most of the attention has been on crops. We don't really know how climate change is going to affect animal production. We've also got how climate change affects and the acidification of the oceans affects fish and the marine ecosystem. So we've got a lot of problems.
A lot coming. It's going to be very difficult. Sometimes in my darker moments I envisage a world where we are effectively forced to go back to the land in a significant degree, and we will end up living a kind of Wendell Berry-esque existence.
Which would be disastrous, I think.
Right.
Because the benefits of cities is that it does keep people away from the land. And you need sort of less energy intensive transport. You get sort of the benefits of density and scale.
So you don't imagine a sort of Romanian agricultural landscape writ large globally in which we're all living in harmony with?
No, and also, a lot of it's tough life.
It's a very tough life.
Yeah.
Yes, indeed. And great poverty.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, there are a lot of Romanians who don't want to be in Romania anymore.
Indeed. And political crisis at the moment.
Yeah.
It's sort of the last thought really about sort of food as a way of unlocking a better policy across the sustainable development challenges. I feel there's nothing else like food to sort of elicit people's interest and sort of draw and elicit a greater understanding of the challenges that face humanity in the 21st century.
I think it's it's a nodal issue, it's a good unifier because, well, obviously everyone eats and people can see that, food is that bit of the planet that we take into our bodies, so it's very tangible. And because there are everyday choices that people make when they go to the supermarket and they think, well, what shall I eat? And all the multiple factors that people base their decisions on, apart from the ones that we don't know why we're making these decisions, just the choices that are based on personal preferences, family, values, religious taboos, whatever it might be. The stories we tell about food, the centrality it has at all our sort of special occasions, it's really strong for people.
So people could be sort of more aware about their food. Rowan Williams said the other day he was a believer in the slow food movement, people sort of eating more mindfully and thoughtfully, being more aware about the impact it's had, where it's come from. Supermarkets don't really encourage that. Maybe.
No, except, I think we need to also think about it from another perspective, in that slow food often means putting something in a very energy intensive oven for a very long time. A lot of the slow food is about hand-cured charcuterie, etc., which is of kind of questionable environmental impact. So I think there are romantic notions about food that we need to question. It's really, really important that we do, because just because it looks lovely, it might not be. And the second thing is that, again, with the sort of going hand in hand, I think we also need to remember that some of the benefits of what we've seen in recent years has been the liberation of women from the need to spend hours and hours cooking, and you could argue that both ways, and it's complex. It's a very complex set of thoughts and discussions, but I think there have been huge benefits from changes in the food system, but at the same time we do need to reappraise our relationship with food, not just at a personal but at a societal level. This is stuff that we waste and abuse at our peril.
Thank you, Tara. That's very clear. And to go back to your initial 3 points, I feel that blueprint that you set out at the outset is a fairly clear and essential way to go. So I thank you for that. And I like your resistance to sort of simplicity, oversimplification, because this is an incredibly complex issue. Thank you very much for the interview, and
You're welcome.
I look forward to working with you on this issue.